Hi, hi. Today I would like to talk about a tale of survival. I would like to take you back to the 18th century. It is in a place near Ireland, and it is about a Scottish captain, or rather a Scottish maritime sailor. This Scottish maritime sailor had been on a ship that was a warship which would be engaged in maritime warfare. And this warship was a British warship, and it had set sail from Ireland. And in the middle of the journey, it had decided to take a break at a place in South America, somewhere near the coast of Chile, among a series of islands, which generally are called an archipelago. It anchored off, or it took a break at one of the islands of an archipelago called Juan Fernandez, near the coast of Chile of South America. At this time, the Scottish sailor Alexander Selkirk wanted to repair the ship. The ship was driven by a captain called Strandler, and he had an argument with the captain that the ship was not ready to set sail yet and continue its journey because there is a possibility of a leakage, a dangerous leakage that could be dangerous to the lives of the sailors. Here, Alexander Selkirk had had argued to such an extent that he told the captain that he would either repair the ship or he wouldn't travel further in the ship. In this regard, the captain of the ship told Alexander Selkirk that he was ready to put him down, and he did as he said. But once Selkirk was on that island, he kind of changed his mind and wanted to get back on board. The captain found that Selkirk was a quarrelsome person. I've already told you that he had an argument with the captain, and the captain did not want Selkirk to come back on board, and hence Selkirk was not allowed to come back, return to the ship. Selkirk was left alone in the island. He could not do much to ensure that the captain changes his mind. All he could do is see his ship sail away and merge into the horizon. After the ship had gone away, Alexander Selkirk was left on his own in the island. It had become dark, and he was hungry. He had a long barrel gun with him that could be used over his shoulder. He decided that he would hunt on one of the goats. There have been some goats that have been left behind by some of the sailors who had come to this island in the past. And Alexander Selkirk succeeded in hunting down a goat. He had grilled the goat and consumed it for the night and calmed his anger. As I told you, it was already a night time, and he was he had dozed off for some time. But at the same time, at some point at night, he had woken up. Something was biting at his shoes. He was still in a sleepy mode. His eyes were not completely open, but as soon as he opened his eyes, he could see that a rat was biting at his shoes. He had immediately pulled back his blanket and had stood up, and he had found that there were a number of rats that were around him, that had rushed away from him as soon as he had gotten up from his sleep. That night, Alexander Selkirk could not get much sleep. By morning time, he had found a solution for the menace of the rats by tempting the cats of the island with some morsels of his goat meat. He was able to keep away the rats, and subsequently, in the subsequent nights, he was able to sleep peacefully. He had been in this island for a long time. The days have passed to years. He had been running out of gunpowder for the use of his long barrel gun, which is also called a musket. His shoes had fallen apart, had torn off. He had to walk barefooted on the island. And since he had no use of the musket, as there was no gunpowder, he still had to hunt for his food. This time, he had to wrestle with a goat, chase a goat, and wrestle with a goat to bring it down and ultimately consume it. But it was not all that easy all the time. On one occasion, he had cornered a goat at a high cliff. He had to jump at the goat to get hold of it, and both the goat and Alexander Selkirk had fallen off from the high cliff or the rock. They kept falling down for some time before the goat was hit by the impact of the ground. They had fallen through an undergrowth of bushes, and for Alexander Selkirk, he was a lucky man because the goat could cushion him from the impact of the fall onto the ground below. Despite that, he had sustained injuries. He was completely exhausted, and it was already night time, and it took one more day for him to reach back to his established camp at some other point. He had always been scanning at the horizon. He was looking at the large expanse of the seas to check if there are any ships that would be coming the way of the island, so that they could rescue him. He also ensured that he would keep himself away from the Spanish ships. As I told you, he was a Scottish sailor, and he was aboard a British expedition, aboard British ships in the first place before he got down in the island. The Spanish were enemies of Britain, and this Scottish sailor, Alexander Selkirk, was a person involved in maritime warfare, and hence, being a British person as well as being a person of warfare, it was highly likely in the mind of Alexander Selkirk that if Spanish ships had spotted him on the island, they would either capture him or kill him, and hence it was important for him that he would keep away from their sight. But on one occasion, he was not that successful in keeping himself away. A Spanish ship had moved at, at the bay of the island, and the Spanish sailors have spotted him and they chased him. As he was running, there were bullets that raced past his ears. Ultimately, he climbed up a tree and hid himself among the branches of the tree. The sailors and waited, and Alexander Selkirk waited until the sailors would lose interest in the chase and return back to their ships. Things happened as Alexander Selkirk had thought. A lot of the Spanish sailors had returned back to the ship and ultimately left the island. On another occasion, probably after 4 years, there were British ships that were coming towards the shore of the island. There was a boat that was coming towards the shore, and Alexander Selkirk, having identified that the ships associated to the boat was that of British, was excited that finally there was some rescue for him from this island. He had lit up a beacon of fire. Fumes of smoke was visible over long distances, and yet the boat that was coming to the shore of the island would return back in the middle of its journey, in between its journey. Alexander Selkirk was desperate that his signal be received by the boatmen, but it was not to be. It was found out that the boatmen thought that the fire beacon was associated to the Spanish, hence they returned back. Ultimately, after 2 days, there would be rescue for Alexander Selkirk from the island. By this time, he had grown a long beard and had been wearing goat skin as his clothes. And he had finally been rescued. Through this video, I want to point out the kind of trials and tribulations that Alexander Selkirk had to face while he stayed alone in the island. Firstly, he had to ensure that the rats shouldn't pester him. He had found a solution for that. And then once he found that he was running out of gunpowder, he had no other option but to catch the goats by himself by wrestling them to the ground. There was a problem on one occasion where he had to jump on a goat and had to sustain a fall, and then he had to keep himself away from the Spanish sailors who were the enemies of Britain. And finally, when a boat would come possibly to rescue him, a British boat, it would turn back on some kind of misunderstanding, and ultimately, after 2 days after such a misunderstanding, he would be rescued. Hopefully, you found this video interesting. Thank you.